I moved from Argentina to Denmark over 10 years ago, and I can tell you without any doubt that I am a changed man. It is often said that you're the average of the 5 people you most hung out with. By extension, you do also say as well you're the average of the 5 million people you share the country with. Today what I want to do is go specifically on how are the things I have changed myself, and with that give you a bit of a hint on what could be in store for you as an expat living in a city like Copenhagen. So this might sound strange to you, but before moving to Denmark I never really checked the weather, so definitely not daily. In Buenos Aires, my hometown, you just don't really need to. So most days are sunny. They of course rate their rains and their storms, but they're kind of predictable, and the temperatures are consistent through the season. So it's warm in summer, it's cool or nice in spring and autumn, it can get cold in winter, but you don't really need to complicate it. This could not be more different in Denmark. So the weather app here got promoted to the top of my iPhone's home screen. I check it a few times a day and also check if it's, something has changed, because like the weather is quite unpredictable here, right? So I even routinely check for a specific feedback on what is going to be the temperature or the rain for a specific part of the day, for a specific hour. So many important decisions after all in Denmark, like what to wear, where to go out, and whether to go to the office or stay home and so on, are relying on this data. Thankfully, the weather reporting in Denmark here is quite legit, so it's often spot on, and at least more often than not. Career. So I worked for Maersk in Copenhagen, and before Maersk I was working in Carlsberg as well. So, and if you had asked me, or you had told me 10 years ago that I would be working in so many different corporations, I would be like just telling you you're crazy. I would be telling you it was impossible, because back then I was super renegade. I was like off into this digital nomad lifestyle. I wanted to have an unconventional life. There was no way in the world I would see myself working in a corporate with a suit and so on. Thing is, corporate in Denmark is good. So if you look into almost every company in Denmark, or at least all the medium and big ones, they give you a lot of flexibility for when you want to be at the office, so you don't need to be staying until 6 p.m. or whatever. You have good perks, you have a good and decent salary for sure, and you also have a lot of holidays. And this is not really common in a lot of different places. I had to tell you, I've been living a lot of different places around the world. This is quite unique to Scandinavia, and especially before COVID. Now maybe it's a bit changing in a lot of different places as well, right? But at least this is the way it has been in Denmark for a long time. On top of this, right, for a small country as Denmark is, you still have a lot of big international companies doing interesting things here as well. Especially again, considering the size of the country. Denmark definitely punches above their weight on this. Next, taxes. And taxes, right? So taxes are so expensive in Denmark that is just ridiculous. So even if I have the money, I just feel ripped off every single time I enter a taxi in Denmark. Now, just to put it into perspective, right? The 8 to 10 minute drive from the airport to my place, or vice versa, can cost me sometimes up to 300 krona. So that's well over 40 euros. Taxis were a top expense for my son's first 2 years, just for the few times that we had to take him from our home to the hospital, and we just couldn't take him in any other way. So bit about home expenses with a kid is over here. Hence, I almost never take a taxi here. So I do a lot of taxis when I travel, but here in Copenhagen, again, it's just something that is only if it's absolutely necessary and there's no other options. I mean, this has been a huge change for me. Meat. So there's another thing I do a lot less in Denmark, and that is to eat meat. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. After all, I'm, as I said, from Argentina, where we eat massive amount of meat. And when I say meat, I mean specifically beef. That's what we consider meat back there in South America, right? So in Argentina, even I would say Argentina and Uruguay are number 1 and number 2 beef eaters per capita in the world by a long stretch. So definitely not gonna do the same, even if I would move to somewhere else in Europe. To put it into perspective, I used to have like 2 out of 3 meals having beef. That's kind of the norm back there in Argentina. Here, this has changed. In Denmark, I still eat a decent amount of beef, but definitely not as much as I did before. Just like taxes, beef is expensive here, and then we don't really find the meat cuts that personally I like too much. In any case, I do pay for beef a lot more than I did, for example, with taxes. One more thing that I do a lot less in Denmark than it was in South America, and that is to watch football. So I watch a lot less football in Denmark than I used to do in Argentina. And this comes, I could realize, for multiple reasons. First one is I only have one love, you could say, and that's my hometown team called Boca Juniors. I love football itself, but I could not care less or can't support other teams. So I just like watching football for the sake of it, but I will not be like a fan of an English team or a Danish team or a Spanish team. I just can't get myself to do that. It's Boca Juniors only. Those of you who are really fans of one team, will understand me here. But anyway, one more thing as well on this is that in Argentina, like 80% of the conversations I would be having with my friends are about football. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I mean, that's the level of things. You go for dinner with friends, you basically talk about football, and like that's pretty much it. Here it's almost zero on the other hand, because again, even though I have friends that love football and we like to talk about football, they're always hyped out about Manchester United or Liverpool, and I'm like, okay, great, can't really care too much about them, those teams, right? So the last thing is that the Danish commentators on TV are just so boring. I mean, they basically don't speak, so it's not really engaging to watch TV football here in Denmark, right? So it's definitely not on the top of my list. Next up, Apple. So I didn't own Apple products until I moved to Denmark. And then, hey, look at me now, right? So it's crazy, but I think like Denmark is the most Apple per capita place in the world, or if not like that, I mean, there's no scientific thing here. It's just, that's the feeling that you get when you're walking around the street, you sit in a university or you sit in a cafe even, right? So if you open a Windows laptop next time to go to university or you go to a cafe, you know, like people will looking at you like, okay, what's wrong with you, right? So I definitely went all in with Apple ecosystem. So I have Mac, iPad, iPhone, iWatch, as you can see here, AirPods, you name it. So the whole shebang. Fitness. So specifically about AirPods, that's great because they're excellent when you do workouts. And hey, like when I moved to Denmark, I started to do a lot more workouts than I used to do before. Again, like you kind of feel the pressure here because, you know, people look good. The parks are always full of people jogging. A lot of people bike to work, and then the gyms are always full. Keep in mind that South America, people are quite sporty. At least my social circle was. But I think here it's kind of to the next level. Here is like by default, most people are sporty. It's not just a circle or whatever, like it's most people. It's a very inspiring context as well, right? Like I remember when I was moving here, like a lot of my friends were running marathons. A lot of people were even doing Ironman. So it's not just one or two, but like a decent amount of people. So when you're surrounded by a group of people like this, and as I said, like you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with most, right? If your friends are fitness freaks, you know, that really pushes you to be a lot more into fitness as well. Structure. And if I could point to perhaps the biggest change I had over the last 10 years is that I have become now a very structured person. I started to wake up early, to plan my days, to install good habits, and a lot more. So these are the pillars of what you could call like my drive to high performance. I don't think this is Denmark specific. I think I would have turned this way back home as well, or even if I would have moved to another country. I think like there's certain things about Denmark that makes it easier for me to become like this. Again, you need to have the intrinsic drive, but even then, right, like when dinner is at 6 o'clock, as it's here, or 7 p.m. sometimes, right? Instead of like 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the night, like it's in Argentina, or also when you have like the working flexibility of, you know, when you start work, when you leave work, you can design your life and design your habits with a lot more liberty than if you wouldn't have these opportunities. Charisma. The flip side to structure, you could say, is that I lost charisma. I wasn't ever the soul of the parties or an absolute people magnet, but you could definitely say that I was 100% more popular and more charismatic than I am now. I slowly became more of the median here, so you would see a bit less touchy, less loud, you could say. I was definitely shouting a lot more before, and more overall restrained. This kind of happened a bit in the background. I mean, of course, didn't happen in the first year, didn't happen in the second year, but as you move ahead, you know, this is something that happened, and I'm slowly working also to switch around this back to a proper median as well. I don't think I'll be as, you know, like Latin American as I used to be, but it's also nice to be a bit more like that back again as well. Then a few more points. In Denmark, I started to dress up more like a local. Back when I was in the US, for instance, for a few months, I was even told that I'm dressing like a European, whatever that means. But yeah, I mean, definitely when you look at the way I dress and the way people dress in some of the parts of the world, you know, this looks different, and I've just embraced more of this Danish style of dressing. I just see black all the time and so on. I became also a lot more sensitive around design, so especially interior design. So I fully embraced this minimalistic Nordic style furniture. I mean, you could see sometimes in our house over here. On top of this as well, I started paying a lot more attention to hygge, like burning candles in winter and in autumn when the days are dark, drinking a lot more tea and hot chocolate and all these type of things. So definitely like that. And last two, perhaps even the two most important things I changed in Denmark. And the first one is I became a lot less worried, you could say, because after all, life is easy in Denmark and you don't really need to worry about a lot of the big items that are a problem in different places, right? So you have safety. You almost always have enough to make ends meet. You might not be rich or whatever, but you will not be struggling to think like, okay, I have enough food on my plate as well and so on, which, you know, believe me, in other places of the world, it is a big deal. To have to remove that from your mind, you become a lot more, let's say, the word I'd like to say is frictionless. And that makes so much of a difference. This is a very, very big deal. And the last one is that, and also could be something that coming with age as well, is that I became a lot more chill, a lot more content with less. So I was really ambitious. I wanted this, I wanted that. Now it's a lot more like, okay, I can actually enjoy the good pleasures in life, but I don't need to really go for it and have it all. Alright, if you made it to this far in the video and you enjoyed it, you will love for this one where I go through the strategies I used to survive winter in Denmark. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again next week.